The following story is also available as a read-only version. Check the link in the description if you're interested. This short story is part of A Day in the Life of Hugo Hendricks. It consists of 4 stories, which should be read in no particular order, and were released in an order determined by a random number generator. I strongly encourage you to read the other 3 after this one to get a full picture of what this collection is about. They can be found on my blog, whoisbetty.com, or as audio narrations on the Who Is Betty YouTube channel. At 6 in the morning, a call on his phone line jerked Hugo out of his sleep. He accepted without thinking, more akin to a robot than a man. "Hendricks," he murmured, not considering whether or not his voice was being picked up by the microphone on his nightstand. "Chief?" It was Bettina, the head of his secretariat. "Yes, why are you calling at this hour?" "I just got a message from very high up the totem pole. They want the entire section at the Trinidad plant as soon as possible. They want you there much earlier." Hugo took a deep breath. "Have everything made ready. Wake the head troopers, have them pull their units out of bed and prepare a full convoy. Get a car for me. Tell them I'll be there in an hour, and the section will be there in 2, he ordered. "Yes, Chief," Bettina responded. "Oh, and wake up your husband. Send him to the car. I want my lead tech with me, just in case." He paused for a moment. "Is the kitchen running already?" "Canteen's getting ready for morning service," the secretary confirmed. "Have them bring me up a sandwich, will you? Club, if they have." "Sure thing, Chief." Hugo hung up and rose from the bed. He donned one of his countless grey camo uniforms and plodded into the living room, where he dissolved a packet of Wake Me Up in tap water and drank it. Slowly, the indirect lights in his corporate apartment brightened, to ease his waking. 2 rooms plus a kitchen and a bath made of sanded chrome and polished concrete, and one large frameless window through which he could see the first sunlight of the day wash over the industrial zone. A young cook delivered his club sandwich and left without a word, knowing that Hugo was not in the mood for talking at this hour. While eating, Hugo skimmed over his social media, hoping for an early good morning from his wife Cassandra. She wasn't awake yet. After consuming his breakfast more than enjoying it, he put on his holster and service weapon, then moved to the garage where an armored ATV and Abel Malloy were already waiting for him. Both the vehicle and the lead technician's clothing displayed the corporate logo of the Freeman and Morgenstern Corporation on grey camo. It was an octagon, split into 4 even pieces, their right-angle edges connected by a circle. "So much for my free day," Abel complained before even greeting his superior. No one else in the section would dare speak to Hugo that way, and Abel wouldn't either, in the presence of others. But the 2 of them had grown up together in Vermont, and despite their difference in rank, they were still friends. "You'll get another one," said Hugo, "when we make next month's service schedule." "God damn it, Hugo, 1 free day a week is all I ask, and all the company will give me." "Well, I get 2 per month, so consider yourself lucky. Besides, this is from up high. They don't give a fuck about your beauty sleep." Hugo took the driver's seat and started the engine. He remotely entered his access code for the garage and rolled onto the courtyard of the Freeman and Morgenstern corporate security compound in Shipley. The company owned the entire city of Washington. They owned most of the East Coast, really. There was not much happening on the streets this early in the morning, but Hugo still activated the Priority 1 corporate road access, overriding anyone who paid for any level of premium access to company roads, and keeping all traffic lights in his favor. "What's going on anyway? Bettina wouldn't tell me," asked Abel. "Apparently we're invading Trinidad plant," Hugo responded. "What do they produce there, do you know?" Abel thought for a moment. Weapons, personal firearms, handguns, that type of stuff, I think. They also do assault rifles. Production for the PS-9988 high-caliber sniper rifle used to be there, but they moved that to Cumberland. "I hope this doesn't turn out to be what I think it is," said Hugo, his voice heavy with gloom. But it was. The sat-nav corrected itself from the Trinidad plant proper to a nearby office high-rise. The Freeman and Morgenstern traffic police seemed to have locked off the entirety of Trinidad sector, not just the manufacturing plant. Hugo recognized the office building, which was right by the speedway exit, as a secret fortress. It looked just like any other office complex, but it was built with armored glass and steel plating, could be sealed off from the outside completely, had an independent power supply, CO2 scrubbers, as well as ample food and firearm stocks in the sub-basement. Boxes with ablative plating were installed all over the facade, disguised as design elements, and all entrances had fortified blast doors in case of a siege. All of this was kept from the general workforce, of course. That's why it was a secret fortress. Hugo's knowledge came from the privileges attached to a local management position in corporate security. Judging from how the street was cordoned off into a dead end with police barricades, the building was being used as a beachhead into hostile territory. A minor corporate security detachment was already inside, but they weren't any of his guys. Hugo and Abel were escorted to a conference room. In it, one of the most powerful people in the world was already waiting for them. Tall, bald, with amber eyes and butterscotch skin, he wore a tailored Oxford blue business suit with subtle gold thread lacework and geometric patterns around the shoulders and collar. He had an exuberant smile on his face, and Hugo could not tell whether or not it was genuine. "Gentlemen," he greeted with a singing whisper, "Josiah Murillo, Senior Executive Manager of Human Resources." He extended his hand. "You must be Section Chief Hugo Hendricks, and this..." Hugo was sure he could see tiny lights flicker over the executive's eye. "Abel Mulroy, pleasure to make your acquaintance." They both shook his hand and took seat as he gestured toward them. Another man entered the room, Asian by the looks of him, with light brown hair and a stern face. He was wearing an old-fashioned leather coat and a black business suit with a cyan tie. "All plant security workers have been moved into this building, sir," he noted, speaking directly to Murillo. "Excellent. Executive Inspector, these are Section Chief Hugo Hendricks and his assistant Abel Mulroy. Gentlemen, this is James Kachida. He's with Freeman and Morgenstern Civil Crime Containment." "About time the heavy guns were brought in. The situation borders on insanity," Kachida complained, cordially greeting Hugo and Abel. "Absolutely. Please sit for the general briefing. Shauna should be here any minute now." As if on cue, a young, dark-skinned woman with smoke-grey eyes entered the room. She had voluminous black frills and, like her boss, wore a tailored suit, though hers was simply black. After whispering a few words in Murillo's ear, he nodded and ordered her to start the briefing. With a few taps on her tablet computer, Shauna pulled up several holographic video feeds from surveillance cameras. Most of them had been blocked or showed only static. "As you can see, the agitators have destroyed most of our CCTV equipment. There's only a few cameras left they don't know about, and it's only a matter of time until they find them. They're also shooting down our drones, and we're letting them, because we don't want to play our Joker yet," she explained. "I'm sorry," Hugo interrupted, "but I'm afraid I haven't been briefed on what exactly is going on yet." Shauna looked over to her boss, who gave the indication of a nod. "Well, to keep it simple, the workers of Trinidad plant have armed themselves and taken over manufacturing buildings, corporate housing, roads and parks, and retail areas. The entire neighborhood is designed to be a self-contained unit, and they control all of it now. We've cut their power, so now they're running only on what can be produced locally, meaning that the foundries will stay turned off. We've also cut their cable internet, though they still have access to wireless and satellite. The data volume of all registered devices has been maxed, and the access privileges of identified leaders have been revoked, but we still have to assume they can communicate with the outside world relatively unhindered." Hugo nodded. "I can help out with the aerial situation. We have 16 fully functional stealth drones, which should provide us with plenty of tactical information." He scribbled "release drones" on his notepad and sent it over to Bettina at the compound. "I'm assuming you want us to apprehend and pacify?" "Yes and no," said Murillo. "We want you to prep an extraction team. Get artillery in place around the occupied area, and we want your people in full crowd control gear, armed with sharp ammunition." "You can't be serious," blurted Abel. "Oh, don't worry, we negotiate first. We're not the Chinese after all." Murillo waved it off. "And who will we be negotiating with?" Shauna pulled up the image of an overweight man with small brown eyes, thick jowls, a stubbly grey beard, and only the faint memory of hair on his head. "Solomon Gottschalk. He's made himself known as the leader of the agitators, and he does seem to be generally open to discussion. We want to do that on our terms. That's why you're getting him out." "Different question," said Murillo. "Will your artillery damage the area it is standing on when firing?" "Not if we use the PL-9001 and do it on the blacktop." Hugo shook his head. "Fantastic. You understand the company wants to keep repair costs as low as possible. A penny saved and such, you know the saying," Murillo jested. "Could you draw me up a map of the areas that can be shelled without the damage being too costly?" "I like the way you think, Chief." Murillo smiled. "Shauna, get someone on that. I want it in my office for review in 2 hours." He stood up and clapped. "All right, people, let's get some work done." "We have to talk about this, Hugo," Abel insisted as they walked down to the convoy, which was only now trickling into the parking garage. "There's nothing to talk about. We have our orders and a job to do. That's what we get paid for." "This is wrong, Hugo. Can you not see that? It's beyond barbaric." Hugo turned around and pushed his friend into the wall. "Listen to yourself talk, Abel. You know how much the company has done for you? A trained engineer, who paid for that? Your fucking teeth are insured. If you lose a limb while on duty, Freeman and Morgenstern pays for a replacement. You get paid good money for this job, but the job expects you to work hard in return, and sometimes that means taking tough assignments, because that's how you get ahead." Having decided not to listen to any potential response, Hugo headed downstairs, Abel trailing him. He was already in the process of finalizing the squad roster that would perform the infiltration. There was a desire in him to head the op in person, experience the thrill of a tense mission, but he knew it was a stupid idea. It was one of the few things he missed from the life before becoming a low-level executive. In the garage, he pulled 6 of his best from the ranks, had them outfitted with Spec Ops gear, and placed into a locked communications channel. The others were getting ready for something that might not come, donning padded riot gear, man-sized shields made of bulletproof acrylite, and submachine guns. Every 5th one, often more burly than the others, was given reinforced plating and a riot net launcher instead of a shield. Half an hour later, full aerial surveillance had been established, the target located, and the infiltration team deployed through the sewers. Hugo was staring at several screens in the command center, following helmet camera feeds and live maps. Abel was with him, overseeing the technical end and receiving occasional updates from the engineer setting up the artillery. Josiah Murillo was not there, but Shauna King was, and Hugo found out that she was the executive primary management assistant, assigned exclusively to make all of her boss's wishes a reality. The TAC team ascended through the drain, onto a side street that appeared to be empty. 3 snipers had been installed in hidden sharpshooter cages near the top of the office building that would keep them out of harm's way if things went sour. Dark clouds had appeared on the horizon, and though Hugo wanted to wait for the rain to provide stealth for his soldiers, Murillo had insisted they deploy as quickly as possible. "Time is money," he'd said, scrolling through his phone. "This is Bravo 1. Bravo 2 is picking the lock to the grocery store. Breach is imminent." "Copy that, Bravo 1. This is Central," said Hugo, and immediately spotted a threat. "Bravo 1, you have a hostile incoming around the street corner in south-southwest. She appears to be part of the guard." "Shit!" Bravo 2 exclaimed. His lockpick had snapped. "The fuck they make this thing out of? This is some advanced fucking shit right here these motherfuckers have." "Central, this is Mother 2. I have the bogey scoped." "Hold your fire, but keep her lined up, Mother 2. Bravo 4 and 6, move to the corner and be ready. Keep close to the wall. Mother 2, as soon as she can look into the alley, take her out. When she falls, make sure to pull her in so that nobody on the street sees, Bravo. Affirmative, Central, said all three soldiers in unison. The woman, armed and patrolling, turned right into the alley and fell over dead. 4 and 6 dragged her father in and dumped her into the drain they'd come out of. There was no disturbance. Mother, too, had a silencer. Lockpicked, breach imminent, said Bravo 1. Do it, ordered Hugo. Gas grenades were thrown into the store's small warehouse as the TAC team breached. There were some muffled shots as agitators reached for their guns instead of surrendering. Get on the ground! Corpsec, on the ground now! On the ground, motherfuckers! I don't want to see nobody fucking move! Bravo 5 found Gottschalk and pierced him with an injector, then carried him outside with Bravo 6. They were gone as quickly as they had entered, retreating back into the sewers and exiting at a secure checkpoint. Good work, Chief, Shauna King complimented. Abel said nothing, mumbling something about mortars as he left the command center. In the interrogation room, Hugo gave Gottschalk the second injection. The man woke with a start, drawing in breath sharply. He looked around, panicked for a moment, before collecting his senses and dedicating his attention to Josiah Murillo, who was leaning on the wall by the exit. "What is this?" he asked. "A negotiation, just like you wanted," Murillo explained. "This is not what we agreed upon. This isn't neutral ground. You took me captive. I'm a union representative, and you exec fat cats took me captive." "Let me explain something to you, Mr. Gottschalk. You are not any kind of representative. You are a foreman working at an assembly line for cheap revolvers, who was once found inadequate for the position of floor manager." Murillo's voice was spiteful. "I don't know what delusions of grandeur you have, and I don't care. The fact of the matter is, you are not part of any union, because there is no union. Let me repeat that. There is no such thing as a union at the Freeman and Morgenstern Corporation, because this great company will not be held hostage by the whims of those who contribute the least to it." Gottschalk laughed. It was a rough, joyless rattle. "You fucking dick. You got no idea how it is down here, working under these hellish conditions. We are the ones who make the stuff you sell. You just make the money off it." The agitator spat on the table. "You know what I just did, Mr. Gottschalk? Or rather, what I didn't do?" Murillo asked. "I didn't listen to a word you said, because that's how irrelevant you are. Even here, with a seat at the negotiating table, which you only gain through violence, you're not worth being listened to. Face it, you're weak. You couldn't make it in the world, and now you're trying to blame others for it. But it's all your fault. You're the one who didn't work hard enough, who didn't put in the effort to rise to the top. If you had only worked hard, you would have been rewarded. Can you not appreciate what this company has done for you, Mr. Gottschalk? You have a home in a safe neighborhood, a wife, 2 little boys. Who pays for their school, you think? Who built that edifice? Who pays the teachers, the janitors, and the administrators? Who supplies the food, the free food, that your children eat every day in the school canteen? And still, at the end of the month, you are the one who's getting paid." Gottschalk laughed again. "Looks like I'm talking to F&M's executive comedian." He slapped his hand on the table. "You think we can pay the absurd rent you charge us for that shitty apartment you put us in? You think we can buy the higher shelf products in your overpriced supermarkets, the products that go to waste each month because nobody can afford them? You think all the fees you charge for mandatory education, where you keep my kids dumb and feed them this corporate pride bullshit, don't put me into more debt than I will ever be able to earn myself out of? Debt that gets transferred to my children when you've worked me to death?" He spat on the table again. "Fuck you! Things used to be different. My grandfather told me stories about how you used to be able to decide what to do with your own life, and you got paid enough for the job you did to build a life for yourself, not the company. We used to have rights protected by a government. Now it's just corporate tyranny, and we are no better than indentured servants." "You pathetic little worm." There seemed to be the slightest note of pity. "You disgust me. Weak people who can't cope with their own shortcomings always want some higher authority to step in and take away everything their betters have earned for themselves through hard work and dedication. Those times are over for a reason. We will no longer be stolen from by a dictatorship of the lazy." Murillo leaned over the table. "Getting back to business, here's my first and final offer. You stop your little uprising and give me my factory back. Then you go to jail, forever, doing hard labor." "How about you go fuck yourself?" Gottschalk darted forward, trying to jump on the executive, but Hugo was faster. He let his fist thunder down on the back of the agitator's head, crashing it into the table and breaking his nose. Two of his soldiers came in to apprehend the aggressor. "Thanks," said Murillo. "He would have ruined my suit. I like this suit." Not 10 minutes later, they were back in the conference room, waiting for a call to Hindustan to go through. While Murillo was typing on his notebook, Kachida was going over the mortar positions with Hugo, drinking a cup of tea. Abel was sitting next to them, staring at the ceiling. A hologram appeared at the end of the table. It was the face of an energetic, umber-skinned man with short black hair and brown eyes. Behind him was the nocturnal cityscape of Hyderabad. Michael Leonard Staley, head CEO of the Freeman and Morgenstern Corporation, and one of the top 3 most powerful people on the planet. "Sorry to keep you, gentleman and lady," he said with a nod to Shauna. "I had to get a secure line. Wouldn't want the Gupta Khan Holdings Group to lean in on my top-secret meetings." "No problem, Mike," said Murillo. "You'd think the Hindis would have the decency not to spy on an executive visiting for negotiations of this caliber." "What can I say? It's a viper's den over here, Josiah. People have no manners. It's a different culture." He clapped his hands. The small talk was over. "So, what's the situation? Do we clean?" "It's the most financially advisable thing by a broad margin at this point," Murillo noted. "We've tried negotiating, but the agitators won't budge. Ideologists, communism, really hard to deal with. Plus, even if we got the plant back up and running, for which we'd certainly have to make concessions, the seed is planted. A new outbreak could occur at any moment, which would either make the whole operation financially unstable or divert significant resources from intra-corporate intelligence. Probably both." "How are the shipments looking?" Staley asked. "Output has decreased by 15% over the course of the past quarter. There is no significant backlog of wares from this plant. We'd have a gap in the supply chain," informed Shauna, numbers at the ready. "I need this plant to keep going, and I need it to keep going strong," pressed Staley, looking serious. "Everything it produces goes to the Catalonian separatists, and everything from the Watertown plans goes to the Castilian royalists. This is a very lucrative conflict for us, and I don't want to dial down the sales we make to the Spanish crown. That would not only lose us big-time money, but undermine confidence in our ability to provide guns to fuel their war effort." The HCO clicked his tongue. "If we continue shipments as is, the royalists will have an advantage, and our carefully balanced stalemate might tip in favor of the crown, ending the conflict and taking away a gold mine." He shook his head. "I can't have any shortages go through." "What if we supplemented with weapons from other plants?" suggested Abel, sounding nervous. Staley puffed. Murillo shook his head. "The kill switch, that's why," said Staley. "All weapons of the same plant respond to the same kill switch, so we always have to know which faction has weapons from which plant, in case we want to turn them off. If their opponents bring up the cash to buy the kill switch, the war is over. We mix it up, it all just gets confusing." "I'm sorry, I thought kill switch codes were a last resort security measure, not a commodity to be sold," said Abel, raising his hands defensively but with sarcasm in his voice. "Am I the only one here who has quarrels going through with what we're about to do?" "Shauna, how soon can we terminate this man's contract?" asked Staley. One moment, Mr. Staley," The girl flicked and typed her way through several files on her tablet computer at lightning speed. "By the end of the week, sir." "Fantastic. Consider yourself fired, whatever your name is. I'm putting you on the blacklist. No more work for you at this company or any of its subsidiaries. Enjoy the meeting while it lasts. You'll never fly this high again." Abel's jaw dropped. He looked at Hugo, panic and a plea for support in his eyes. He had to think quick. Go with his friend who had ruined his own career with his own foolish actions, or stay on the right course and build a life for himself. The decision was not easy, but it came quickly. Hugo remained silent and looked at Staley instead. "My section's weapons are not from this plant, so we can safely use a kill switch of our own to pacify and reduce the risk for security personnel." Murillo nodded. "That's actually a better idea than the mortars. Though I think we should still shell to send a message," he considered. "A message to whom exactly?" asked Staley. "The new tenants. I've got droves of people itching for a job. They're crowded in the public areas. You've seen the pictures. Slums upon slums upon slums. Shenandoah, Smoky Mountains, Cuyahoga, take your pick. Send some transporters, they'll pour into them. We drive them here with some urban engineers and people to teach them how to operate the plant. Not only do we expand their skill set into building, which would be a definite increase in human capital, but we also let them know what happens when you try to take what isn't yours. All the while claiming the damages sustained were from a series of unfortunate accidents to cover our asses on the legal front. Anyone who says otherwise gets sued for libel. I could have the plant back up and running by the end of the week. This could actually be a net gain for the company in the long run, what with the overqualified personnel and increased stability." "End of the week still means we lose money," Staley protested. "That's what happens when people don't know their place, Mike. What we're doing now is damage control." "God, that's depressing. What about more immediate fallout? They do still have access to the internet, right?" "Presumably, yes." It was Kichida who answered. "But we'll use our safety containment protocols to filter social media platforms. Anyone posts anything from inside the plant or around it, talks about unrest, explosions, whatever. Even if they use underground jargon, nobody will see it. They won't know nobody's seeing it, of course. We might even automate some of our high-profile bots to respond to their posts and tell them they're wrong." "Okay then, let's do it. Clean my plant up and make sure nobody hears. And get me my weapon shipments back. And do it quick. We're on a schedule here." "Time is money, Mike. You know I know that," said Murillo. "See you around." Staley nodded. "Gentlemen, Shauna, the company thanks." The HCEO's likeness disappeared. "Fantastic. You know what to do, and I really do want this to get done quick. There's a plane to Alaska waiting for me in 4 hours. He turned back to his assistant. "Shauna, I want you to get a convoy to the nearest public slum. Pack in as many people as are needed to replenish this plant once it's been cleared out. Make it a solid mix. I want them there by tomorrow at noon. You, Mr. Malloy, I'll make you an offer. Set up the kill switch for all weapons produced in this plant and located inside of it, and you'll return your employment. No harm done," he added, looking at Abel. His old friend was still speechless, or maybe he was speechless again. Hugo was happy about this. He didn't want Abel to lose his job and get sent to the slums. "I suppose?" Abel answered with a distant expression on his face. "Excellent. Let's get to work then." The agitators knew what was coming. They may not have quite believed their parent corporation capable of it, but it was certainly anticipated. Hugo himself hadn't quite believed the stories about worker pacification until this very moment. But right here, right now, his soldiers at the ready, it was quite real. 200 men and women in full riot gear, organized in squads of 5. 4 riot shield and SMG assaulters crowded around one armored titan with a heavy net launcher. Their helmet projectors gave them tactical information on their routing, enemy positions, squad status, even temperature and wind speed. Their enemies were untrained, scared, and poorly equipped. The kill switch alone meant that none of Hugo's troopers were in any danger. Yet, all of them were as tense as overdrawn guitar strings. They moved to the 4 entry points of the Trinidad plant neighborhood, 10 squads for each. The mortars were already standing by. Hugo gave no impassioned speech before returning to the conference room. It wasn't that kind of operation. On his way up, he was intercepted by Murillo. "Chief, would you accompany me, please?" Hugo obliged. The executive led him down into the cells, where Solomon Gottschalk was being kept in a 2-by-3-meter box of polished concrete. His face was a mess, and he was visibly trying to avoid wincing in pain. Nobody had tended to his injuries, or even cleaned them up. He had no health insurance. The man was tied by his hands and feet, sitting in a corner, unable to move. Frowning, Hugo turned around to Murillo to ask him why he'd led him down here. The answer was immediately self-evident. The executive was handing him a revolver, Smith & Wesson Model 686, from the looks of it. This was an artifact that belonged in a museum, as far as he was concerned. "Do it," he whispered. His amber eyes bored into Hugo's, ordering him to obey with an almost supernatural intensity. He took the gun and stepped into the cell. Gottschalk looked at him with pure hatred, but there was a hint of fear in his gaze. Surely he hadn't envisioned dying like this. Hugo was a professional. In the moment of the kill, he deactivated his conscious mind and let the trained reflexes take over. There could be no hesitation. He inserted his earplugs, lifted the weapon, pointed it at the agitator's forehead, and pulled the trigger. Even through the plugs, you could hear the gunshot echoing through the cell. Old weapons certainly were loud. Though there was only a small, neat hole in his forehead, Gottschalk's blood and brains were splattered over the wall behind him. Hugo stepped out of the cell and reactivated his mind. Josiah Murillo was standing by the door, smiling. "I am impressed, Mr. Hendricks. 27 years old and already a section chief. I knew you had it in you. You're headed upstairs in the world, believe me." He took back the revolver and holstered it inside of his jacket, where it all but disappeared. Without knowing, Hugo could never have told the executive was armed. "I hear your wife and kids still live in Vermont, and your son attends an average school. I don't like that. He'll get upgraded to the best school in the area next month, company's dime. How's that sound?" "Thank you, Mr. Murillo. I'm just doing my job." Hugo bowed inadvertently. "Nonsense. You're doing more than that. You're loyal and competent. The company needs people like you. Shauna told me how you handled the exfiltration. Good planning, improvisation, quick on your feet. Between you and me, I trust nobody's judgment above hers, not even my own." He patted Hugo on the shoulder. "Let's go. We've got some dirty business to attend to." When they returned to the command center, everything was ready. Abel was nowhere to be found, so he was probably out, coordinating some technical aspect in person. James Gachida and Shauna King were sitting in the back with serious faces, and Murillo joined them. Hugo was in charge now. Looking at the monitors, he saw that the downpour had cleared up enough to not impair vision. "Is the kill switch active?" he asked the aide present. "Yes, sir," he answered. "All right then, launch the op." 5 locations were immediately shelled with mortar fire, all of them fortified positions, all of them containing women and children. Everyone had to be terminated. If word got out even in the form of solid rumors, it would damage the company's image. Maybe it would be followed by a lawsuit at the intercorporate court. Rival companies had their spies all over, and they would jump at the opportunity to damage Freeman and Morgenstern by pulling it into a prolonged legal battle. Corporate security squads burst through the opened gateways into the neighborhood of Trinidad Plant. The agitators on their barricades pulled the triggers on their weapons, but they did not fire. Instead, they were mowed down by a barrage of submachine gun-launched bullets. It took them a moment to realize that all of their firearms had been remotely deactivated. The panic that ensued caused most of them to break line and run away, opening themselves up for shots to the back. The net throwers held groups of fleeing agitators in place, and the gunners finished them off when they had a moment of time. Slowly and methodically, they advanced along their predefined paths. Anyone not in full combat gear was killed. The snipers on the rooftops were doing the same, so watching someone fall over and die apparently out of nowhere on the remaining CCTV feeds was no rarity. They cleared out the streets first, converging on fortified positions with other squads. The occasional rocks and stones thrown were deflected by their riot shields, and the combat suits were fireproof. Not that there were any Molotov cocktails around. For an hour, nobody in the command center said a word. The operation was running like a well-oiled machine. Hundreds had been killed, and trucks to transport their bodies to mass graves were already rolling up, all of them operated by corporate security. Nobody outside the most loyal department of Freeman and Morgenstern could be involved with this. Just as the troopers began entering and searching houses and commercial buildings, Hugo's attention was caught by the one CCTV camera pointed at the office building he was inside of. A shadow was falling down along its facade. Was it one of his snipers? Had he been taken out somehow? Or maybe slipped? "Central, this is Mother 2, said a familiar voice. "You're not gonna like this, sir." Hugo pulled Mother 2's scope feed as he zoomed in on the ground before the building. The falling shadow had clearly been a man, but as the zoom tightened and focused, an iron fist clenched around Hugo's stomach. There, on the ground, lying contorted, limbs snapped at impossible angles, was not one of his snipers. It was Abel Malloy. "I'm sorry, sir," said Mother 3. "He just ran past us. We were not prepared." If you liked this story and would like to hear more, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. A new short story is uploaded every Wednesday, and there will occasionally be another one in between if I find the time. Thank you very much for listening and have a great day.